Vengeance is the new film from BJ Novak, who I'm sure most of you know as Ryan from The Office. However, since The Office has wrapped, Novak has kept himself quietly busy with a number of projects. He's been in a few movies here and there, he actually wrote and directed his own series called The Premise on FX, and he's even wrote a couple of books. But Novak is back in the mainstream with a vengeance. Oh, come on, somebody had to do it. Novak is back in full force as the director, writer, and star of this new film, Vengeance. A film about a podcaster who is invited to the funeral of a girl he was hooking up with, whose family treats him like he was her one true love. Her family believes that there's some sort of foul play involved with her death, so Novak's character decides to stick around and investigate what really happened. It's clear after seeing this movie that Vengeance is a film that BJ Novak has been writing for a very long time. It is jam-packed with discussions about society, how one side of the country may view the other, how people react to controversy. There's a lot. Which I have to say, first and foremost, it is clear that BJ Novak is a very smart man. His script brings about points that I thought were uniquely well thought out and brought out what he was trying to get across very effectively. I really liked the opening of the film that seemed like it was a throwback to the old dialogue style of a Woody Allen movie, but instead adapted to the way two New York bros may communicate with one another today. Novak is very aware of the style of speak that people find to be most effective whenever they're posturing. It's that sort of style that seems very rehearsed on something like a podcast or a YouTube video. Spoiler alert, it takes me actually several takes to get something down, so if it seems like this is coming natural, it just means that I'm using the right cut. It's very much some sort of presentation and not entirely honest. People want to get their point across and do so in a convincing manner to make the other person believe that they're smart. However, I will say that this results in some scenes whenever people communicate, not necessarily how people would in real life. If you're sitting in the middle of Texas talking to someone you just met, you won't necessarily expect to have an in-depth conversation about the beginning of the universe, for example. So those moments for me don't land particularly as well as I would have liked them to, but it still provided a lot of thought about these ideas Novak wanted to discuss. Ideas that I hadn't really thought of before that clearly Novak has spent a lot of time thinking of, and specifically what his stance on certain things are that I think are better suited for an essay rather than a movie. This movie is also kind of like a fish out of water tale as BJ Novak plays a New Yorker coming to Texas. Now I am a Texan myself, so I thought that Novak did a really good job with some of the cultural things in this movie. There are definitely some characters in this movie that I have met in real life. I particularly love the gag that Novak has regarding Whataburger in this movie. There's an entire conversation that takes place with Novak asking the people that are housing him why they like Whataburger so much, and I thought that it was perfect. There are some moments where I thought some of the characters acted a little too stupid or naive. And I'm not saying that there aren't stupid or naive people out there, I just thought it didn't make sense for some of the characters and other things that they do in the movie. Maybe that's just me being a little bit of a homer, but I feel like it's fair criticism. However, I will say I love the grandma in this movie. I believe that she's played by an actress named Luann Stevens. She crushes it. I also didn't know that Ashton Kutcher was in this movie, and let me tell you, it is a breath of fresh air seeing him in a movie again. This is the first movie that he's been in since 2014, and that's just far too long. This guy still got that charisma that made him a star on that 70s show, and we need more of him in my opinion. I'm also a big Succession fan, so it was cool seeing J. Smith Cameron in a role that wasn't just Jerry from that show. Boyd Holbrook is another actor I like seeing pop up in projects here and there, and I thought he played his role well in this movie. His character in particular I thought could have benefited from a little bit more consistent writing, because he has scenes where you understand him, he's a protective brother, he wants to find out what happened to his sister, but there are some moments where he just acts so naive, like being taken advantage of by Novak's character in ways where I don't really believe giving more context about this character that really made sense for him. But Holbrook does do a good job with his role in the film. This movie also suffers from some drastic shifts in tone. This is a very funny movie. I mean, Novak wrote for The Office, so clearly he knows how to write comedy. But it's also a very serious dialogue-rich film, so sometimes when it tries to balance those two different tones, it's just a little jarring for me. me. At the end of the day, this movie showcases Novak's thought processes over a bunch of topics that have had relevancy from the late 2010s to present day. He tackles a lot in this film, and I thought he did so very well for the most part. Like I said before, there are times when it doesn't make sense that certain conversations would be taking place like they are, and there is one thing that happens in the story that really only exists to keep the audience guessing as to what's going on that ultimately takes us nowhere. There are also some moments in this movie that dragged a little bit for me, but for the most part, I think that Novak's efforts weren't for nothing, and he created something that he can really be proud of. It's sort of a familiar story if you've listened to any true crime podcast, but it was interesting seeing that format put onto screen. I'm going to give Vengeance a 6.5 out of 10. I debated on whether or not I actually wanted to make a review for this film, but after seeing the box office returns from its first weekend, I felt compelled to make a video about it. This movie opened at number 10 and didn't even make $2 million in its opening weekend. Granted, it didn't even open to 1,000 theaters, but still, if you look at the per theater average, this movie's a flop. And I don't think it deserves to flop. It's really disappointing to me that whenever a creator like BJ Novak puts so much effort into this movie, between him directing it, starring in it, writing it clearly over the last several years, it's disappointing to me whenever a creator does something like that and it doesn't do well financially. It is getting good reception from most audience members, but I thought that I'd go ahead and lend my voice to it, however loud or silent it is on this channel, in saying that if you are on the fence about seeing Vengeance, go see it. I don't think you'll be sorry. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.